Hello and welcome to another edition of Open Book. My name is John Gray. I'm a TV journalist in Albany, New York. I'm also an author on the side. I've written some children's books and some novels. And when they asked me what kind of show I would want to tape or do on here, I said, I want to talk to authors because I love talking to authors. And we have authors of every shape and size, every kind of book. If you wrote it, we'll put you on the show and talk about your book. And we've got an interesting, really interesting one. You might, this guest might be the most interesting one we've had on so far. I'm going to bring you up right here. It is a book called Human Hacking. I'll read the whole title, Chris. It's Win Friends, Influence People, and Leave Them Better Off for Having Met You. That is quite a title. Chris, is it Hadnagy? Is that how you pronounce the last name?
That was perfect.
There you go. Well, I do news for the living, so I should be able to pronounce names at least. Chris, thanks for coming on and talking to us about this book. Before we get into the book itself, give me a little bit about you. Where did you grow up, education, all that good stuff?
Okay, so I was born in New York. My parents were both in the Bronx. When they started having kids, we moved out to Yonkers and then to Nyack. I bounced around, went in Pennsylvania for a little bit, ended up down in Venice, Florida for a few years, back up in Pennsylvania, and now back in Orlando. So that's where I'm at. Education's an interesting story because I was in college for a month, and then I wrote something called a war dialer, and by mistake shut down Sarasota County's phone system. So I was exited out of college, and that's when I knew that this was going to be my career.
I'm picturing Matthew Broderick in War Games. Now, did you create something like a virus or something, or did you just accidentally hack something? What happened?
Yeah, it wasn't. So this is a really crazy story, but do you remember back when we were kids, they had the Captain Crunch boxes, and they had the whistles that were in there?
Yeah.
Okay, the Captain Crunch whistle was at 2600 megahertz, and that is the exact tone for a quarter in a payphone. So we figured out if you carried that whistle around and you went up to a payphone and you blew it, you got free phone calls, right? So so that was something that we all kind of the hacker group we figured out. Now computers come out, and I'm thinking, I wonder if I can have a computer play that tone, and if I can get free calls at home, right? So I wrote this thing. And mistakenly, I called thousands of numbers at once instead of one.
Oh.
And the Sarasota County phone system couldn't handle it. And it said, okay, you're dropped. And it just shut down the whole county system for about an hour.
And you couldn't stay anonymous? They tracked you down?
Yeah, at the time, it wasn't anything illegal because there was no laws on it. So the cops came to the school and they were like, hey, who did this? I was like, that was me. And they're like, hey, don't do that again. That was messy. And I'm like, I won't. Very sorry. And then the dean was like, thank you. See you. Goodbye. So,
got you. So did you stay in college or change colleges and finish a degree, or did you go into a career?
I didn't, which is crazy to think that I'm a professor and I don't have a degree. So, no, I didn't finish.
And what kind of career did you go into then? How old were you, 18, 19 years old? Did you bop around different jobs?
I did. Oh, man. I had so many different careers. I owned a window cleaning company. I was a chef for 2 or 3 years. I was an IT guy. I was a negotiator for stainless steel in India and China. I was a vice landlord. I literally bounced around everywhere.
Wow. And how do you get into the world of human hacking and social engineering? And there were other books before this book, right? As I'm looking at your bio.
Yeah. So yeah, I had this is my fifth book. So it's actually an interesting story. I was doing network pen testing, hacking for a living with the company I was working for. And I was reading books about famous con men and scammers like Victor Lustwig, Frank Abagnale, the guy, the Catch Me If You Can guy, and Kevin Mitnick. And I was reading these books and I was like fascinated by the fact that throughout all these hundreds of years, it was the same thing. They were all doing the same thing, just the technology changed. So I said to my boss, like, nobody's doing this. We should be testing this with our companies, with our clients. So I was like, well, let's ask. So we asked this one guy, can we do some phone calls or some emails? And at the time, there wasn't a word called phishing or vishing. And he said, sure, do it. So I started doing a phone call. I call, hey, this is Paul from IT. We got a problem with your IP address. I need to reset it. Can I have your password? Bam, gave me the password. Whoa, I was like, that was too easy. Then I send an email. Hey, this is Paul from IT. We got a problem with your node. I need to reset it. I need your password. Emailed me a password. It's like, what is going on here? So we did this.
You were doing this with the company you worked for just to sort of test out their security? Is that what you're doing?
So companies would hire us to test their security.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it was kind of like we were ethical hackers, right? So they would hire us and say, go test our people and our security. So I hand the report to the boss, to the main guy, the CEO, and he says, okay, Chris, well, that worked. How do I fix it? And I looked at him and said, I got no clue. And he said, this is the thing that changed my whole life. I wouldn't be standing here today if it wasn't for this. He said, if I went to my mechanic and I said, hey, what's this noise? And he said, it's your brakes. And I said, fix it. He goes, I don't know how. I'd never use that mechanic again.
Right.
And I'm like, that is a good analogy. So for anyone watching, you can see that there's hundreds of books behind me. I started buying everything I could on influence, persuasion, manipulation, neuroscience, nonverbals, body language. And I was just reading it and writing notes in the columns. And in about a year, I wrote a framework. And I put this framework out to say, like, hey, this is how humans make decisions. And this is how scammers are manipulating those decisions. This is what happens in the brain when this happens and that happens. And my boss was like, we should put this online. So we did. We put it online. And 2 months later, I get a call from Kevin Mitnick's publisher. She says, we want you to write a book. No one has ever written a book on social engineering outside of people who ended up in jail. I want you to write this framework as a book.
And what is social engineering? Kind of influencing people
Yeah.
or manipulating people? I know you have a big arc in your book is there's a difference between influencing and manipulating and suggesting. And talk about that just a little bit.
So I define social engineering as any act that influences a person to take an action that may or may not be in their best interest, right? Because it's using the same principles of influence, but what's my goal? Is my goal just to get something from you regardless of how it hurts you? Or is my goal to actually negotiate good terms, right? Get something, but we're both getting something out of it.
Sure.
And that definition is what formed my framework. And that's what formed that first book. And that's what made this company. And, here we are. That was 2010. So 15 years later, here we are, and it's a whole industry now.
So a lot of authors, they'll come up with an idea for a book, they write the book, and then they spend, sometimes years trying to find an agent or find a publisher or anybody to return an email or a letter that they might mail. In your case, it was actually a publisher kind of reaching out to you for one of your first books?
Yeah, I realize now, having been an author for 5 books, how lucky that was for me.
Sure.
Because seeing the process you got to go through to fill out applications, I didn't do any of that. She called me on the phone and asked me to write the book, and I rejected her at first because I was like, I'm not an author. I'm just a guy that hacks stuff. And she convinced me to do it. And that first book is what kind of set me up for the next 3 with the same publisher. And then because that first book, I can't even believe I'm saying this out loud, had over 100,000 sales for a tech book. It was easier to get my 5th book contract but we had to do the paperwork and all that stuff because of that success, for being lucky, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing no one talks about is the publishing world is a business, whether, and I hate to say it, but whether you're selling potato chips or widgets for your brakes or books, they want to make money, and if they think the book will make money, that's how I think a lot of people could write the great American novel, but they'll see a Kardashian get a book deal, and they say, well, this isn't fair. I can write better than Kim Kardashian, but it's really about sales and exposure, and than it is about the quality of what you wrote, right?
Yeah. Sadly, yeah. Because my first book, I tell people don't read it. It's bad. Like it's not good. So I say if you haven't read any of the other ones, don't read that one. Start off with the newest one. That's way better. I got much better over the 12 years of being an author. But yeah, it was just that it was new. It was novel. No one had ever written about it before in that context. So it was like a very sexy topic for them to grab onto.
Got you. We're up against our first break, so I'll take a break here with our author, Chris Hadnagy, and we will come back with more talk about human hacking, actually this book, after this short break. Stay with us. All righty, we are back with our author, Chris Hadnagy, and the book is Human Hacking, When Friends Influence People, Leave Them Better Off for Having Met You. So this is the 5th book. How long does it take you to write a book? Do you sit there and do you map it out? I always say to my authors, and I agree with this, it's one of my favorite quotes, George R.R. Martin, who wrote the Game of Thrones books. He said there were 2 kinds of authors in his mind, the architect and the gardener. The architect has to lay it all out ahead of time and get everything situated before they write the first word. The gardener kind of just gets in there and sees where the book goes. Which of those are you? Did you kind of lay this out ahead of time, knowing what you wanted to do?
I'm the gardener, for sure.
Yeah.
100% the gardener, yeah.
And so this book, what is the purpose of this book? To help people? Is it hacking? looking at some of it, is it hacking yourself a little bit to change your own mind frame and to make yourself more successful, to make yourself more happy? Is that part of this, or is it also a lot of it about? I hate to use the word influence people, but you kind of do have to. It's part of the book and part of this, right?
Yeah, so here's what happened. After doing this for 12 years, and I get part of my job is I get paid to physically break into banks and things like that in broad daylight. So I have to talk to people and convince them I'm the pest control guy or I'm the elevator repair person and I belong here. And doing that for so many years, I realized that there are so many principles of influence and nonverbals and elicitation that you can use in your daily life that would be amazing. And I was using them in my daily life without realizing it. And when we say influence, I think of like gently getting someone to want to do what you want them to do, right? So not manipulating them when they're done. They're like, oh, why did I do that? So this book came out of the idea that I can actually help people communicate better, succeed in their jobs, their marriages, their lives, if they can learn how to first, like you said, I love that, understand yourself. First, self-reflection and becoming self-aware, and then second, learning how to use that self-awareness in your communication style to be more influential.
And what are some of the things that you cover in this book that you talk about that could help people do this in their own lives? Give me some examples.
So I talk first about DISC profiling, and that's a profiling tool that the FBI uses, and it's a communication profiling tool, not a personality profiling. Like it's not the Myers-Briggs. It is a communication profiling tool. And when I found this tool, it kind of blew my eyes open. I didn't realize how sometimes my communication can come off so adverse to people, because I'm a very direct communicator. So I'm a very big D as a communicator, and those kind of people can be very direct, very abrupt, very abrasive. And I think, well, that's just how I am. But when I learned about that communication style, it made me realize, oh, this is why that argument happened with my wife. Oh, this is why that employee got offended when I said that. And it started to open up things to realize that I need to be more self-aware about my communication style. So that right off the bat in the book, we start with that, and that really helps people open their eyes.
Yeah, I always love the quote, and I'm going to clean it up for the purpose of this. They'll say, well, if you run into a jerk today, you ran into a jerk today. If you run into 6 jerks today, I think you're the jerk. Yeah. You know what I mean? When you're having problems with everybody, we're really not self-aware, are we, of how we are perceived or how we come off? And part of that is people don't want to probably hurt your feelings and say, geez, John or Chris, I really didn't like it. It's hard to have confrontations with people, even if you do it in the gentle way, isn't it?
It is, but a lot of times when people would say that, like somebody would say to me, like, hey, you're kind of being a jerk right now. I didn't want to hear it. So it's kind of like losing weight. If somebody walks up to you and says, hey, man, you're getting kind of heavy, you're like, hey, you offended me. But if I say it, it's okay. If I say I need to go lose weight, that's perfectly acceptable. So when you're reading your profile going, oh, I'm a jerk, that's okay. But if I tell you, I've just offended you.
Right. Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I was thinking about that, in terms of human hacking. And, if let's say you're married and you want to help your spouse get exercise. Yeah, saying, I'm going to buy you a treadmill, or that can come off as offensive. If you say, I was talking to my own doctor and he'd like me to get more healthy, but I don't want to walk alone. Would you want to walk with me so we could talk about stuff? It might be fun for us to get out of the house. Suddenly now it's almost like their idea of like, well, I'll go with you, and that's a big difference, isn't it? It's
a huge difference, and I'm smiling because I use that exact analogy all the time when people ask, like, well, what's a positive version of that? And I use that exact analogy because it's true. You wouldn't walk up. I mean, that's a marriage-ending argument if you were to say that to your wife, right? So
right.
that way you just did it. That's the perfect way to do it.
It's amazing too. You talk about hacking, and I was reminded when you were talking about trying to break into banks. There was a video I came across on TikTok. It was two, I'll call them in the nicest way, idiots. They were both like they were 20 years old, and they were goofy kids, college kids, and they said that they read, I hope it wasn't your book. It could have been, but they said, oh, we saw this thing that if you can get in anywhere, if you've got a backwards cap and a ladder, and one of you's got a clipboard, and they were testing it out, and and some of their friends was, and God help them, they were just walking into places. And people were just assuming, well, he's got a ladder. They must belong here. I don't run the whole TV station I'm in right now. So if some guy walks by with a ladder, somebody must have hired him. He's going to go fix something. It's really shocking, isn't it? The way the trust people have, it's all how it's presented. We really saw that with Frank Abagnale with Catch Me If You Can, right?
It's called pretexting, and I've seen that. But that's why in my books I really promote the idea that you have to be ethical if you're going to use these skills. I can't control how someone will use them, but sadly that might have come because I talk about that exact scenario where there was a video of two guys who got into the Super Bowl because of a high-vis vest and a ladder and a clipboard. And literally security was just opening the gates for them, letting them through. When they got to where they wanted, they put the ladder down, took the vest off, and went and got seats and watched the Super Bowl for free.
Well, I've heard some people who run security for like FBI and those things in interviews say a lot of that security is outside. Once you're in, it's assumed you belong there, that you had to get badged in. We see that at a lot of places, even schools now, where you got to go through. You're going to go to your kid's school play. You got to sign in. There's double locked doors, and so you got to be careful. What hit me too, Chris, is at the beginning of your book, you have almost a pledge you want people to sign, saying, "I'm not going to use this stuff." Obviously, it's on the honor system. You can't know if they use it or not. What was the point of that? Just to make people more aware before they even started reading to pay attention to how I'm going to use this?
Yeah, it's kind of like I was thinking about this philosophy. I heard some schools are doing this now, where they have kids sign a pledge to abstain from sex or drugs or something, right? They have an anti-drug pledge, and they found studies have found that when kids sign that, they're much more likely to not try drugs because as soon as someone offers, they go, wait, but I signed a promise that I wouldn't. So, of course, you can't enforce it. I can't, and I even say that I can't enforce this, but I'm hoping that if you sign this and that you decide ever to be unethical, that's going to hit your conscience to be like, ooh, I did promise myself I wasn't going to use this unethically.
Got you. What's the reaction been to this book? Have people been surprised how well it's helped them in terms of their own relationships or work or whatever?
I've had some really amazing reviews and feedback. I had somebody come to me, and I don't know if this is true, but he told me that it fixed his marriage. It saved his marriage. That once they both read the part about DISC, and they realized why they were not communicating compatibly. And then they started reading how to work through that, and they worked through it, and it was something that helped them fix their marriage. I've had people tell me they got new careers because of it. They got the raises that they wanted, the job because of it. So that makes me kind of proud. That's what I wanted to hear when I wrote that.
Sometimes it's just finding common ground, isn't it, in terms of, okay, there's 19 things that we disagree on, but there's some stuff we don't. I just heard, I love music, and I heard the guy who wrote Breakfast at Tiffany's, that old hit song, very catchy song. I think they were a one-hit wonder. But he said he overheard a conversation at another table, and it was basically somebody trying to break up with somebody else, like we just don't have anything in common. And the guy got throwing a Hail Mary pass. It wasn't that movie, but it was something. But wait a second, we both love, going to Woodstock in the summer. Remember how, and to get them to remember and go, yeah, we did have fun at that. And well, wait a second, maybe I shouldn't flush this whole relationship because we do. Is that part of it, finding that kind, especially now where it bothers me, Chris, when I see people, and there was a lot of this saying, don't be with your family on Thanksgiving if they disagree politically, and shut people out. And I think, maybe you can go and find something you can talk about other than the president or Congress or a war somewhere,
I wrote a story in this book about this actually working for me. I was paid to break into this building, and we had the plan. I was going to go in and talk to the front desk lady, tell her I had an interview, get back there, have the whole thing set up. I walk in, and there's 18 people in the lobby arguing, like violently arguing, like screaming at each other. And it was because, sadly, this was when it was relatively new, there was another school shooting. And half of the room was saying we should ban all guns in America, and the other half of the room was saying we should arm the teachers. So they turned to me, a complete stranger, and they're like, well, what do you think? You could settle this argument. And I'm like, ooh, like this is not something I want to get involved in, right? So I'm thinking like 100 miles an hour, and I say, well, here's what I think. I said, I don't want my kids to die, and I think we're all in the same boat. I said, so I have 2 kids, and it scares me every day to send them to school. When I kiss them goodbye, I'm hoping it's not the last time. And everybody calms down, because that's the common ground. Right? The common ground was that everybody wanted their idea to be the best because they don't want their kids to be afraid to go to school. But they were arguing about making their idea the best idea instead of just saying, hey, we all agree. We just want our kids to be safe. So that common ground thing, that works in even really, really intense circumstances. I once remember interviewing an FBI agent, and I asked him, how do you interview terrorists without just disgust on your face? And he asked me, he said, what does a terrorist want? And I'm like, to kill people. And he's like, no, no, no. Let's get more basic. What is motivating him? And I'm thinking about it and thinking about it. I'm like, I guess he wants to please his God. And he's like, great. Can you understand that feeling? I said, I could. He's like, there's your common ground. Now, your belief may not make you go kill people, but you have the common ground there. And he said, that's what I do when I walk in that room. I find that common ground, even with the worst people on the planet, and now I can have a conversation. And that like really moved me big time into that. That's part of that in that book, because that's such an amazing principle.
Yeah, it is. Listen, we're up against the second break. We'll come back with more, a final segment with our author, Chris Hadnagy, and the book is Human Hacking. All right, final segment with our author, Chris Hadnagy. The book is Human Hacking, How to Win Friends, Influence People, Leave Them Better Off Than Having Met You. That's the key. Leave them better off. Don't manipulate them and get them to give you their favorite collection of baseball cards, and then you're going and cashing them at the pawn shop. We don't want to take advantage of people, right?
No, exactly. That's why that part is so important. It's because you can use these skills manipulatively and maliciously. But if you have it in your mind that my goal is to always leave people feeling better for having met me, then I'm not going to use these skills in a way that will harm them.
Does law enforcement ever want to bring you in for seminars and things? Because I would think a lot of this would help. I picture, it's funny. You watch these movies and you never know how much of it's accurate. But a lot of times they talk to real people who do this stuff, and that's where the scripts come from. And one thing you'll see a lot of cops do when somebody's done something wrong. Let's say some guy kills somebody who he thinks hurt his daughter. They'll come in and say, look, that common ground. If it were my daughter, I got to be honest with you, I'd probably be sitting where you are right now. And they get that connection, and maybe that's how they get them talking. Now, some would say that's manipulation. You could also say that's just a cop being honest, saying, like, we all have our breaking point, and you must have had yours, but I'd love to hear why this happened. Do the police like to hear from you and how to use these techniques?
It's amazing. I actually had the privilege of teaching at the FBI's agent college for a few years. I got to teach US SOCOM. I've been invited to teach MI5, MI6 over in the UK. It's been such an amazing ability to come around and actually teach these. I also run a nonprofit called the Innocent Lives Foundation. And part of that is we help law enforcement track people who traffic children. And I educate officers. We do these ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children, teaching seminars. We get like 70, 80 agents in the room, and we teach them interview tactics for child predators. So,
well, you must see tons of these, not your tactics, but this kind of stuff, the manipulation with the adults who prey on kids, how they isolate them or try to find common ground with them and just try to I guess they call it grooming, right?
Yeah, 100%. This is exactly what they do in the most disgusting sense. And they'll do that they usually look for kids who are complaining about their parents or complaining about their life. And then they'll say, yeah, I know what that feels like. Now all of a sudden I got a friend that understands me. And then they go from there. It's really, really disturbing to watch it happen, to see it happening. But if we can educate these law enforcement agents to be able to catch these guys, interrogate them or interview them, we don't call it interrogation anymore, get the confessions, we can get them put away so they can't hurt kids anymore.
It strikes me, somewhat of your intellect writing books like this, if you deal with people who are like-minded like you or who write these books or read these kind of books, or even maybe your own spouse, you must have moments where you say, can I get you cream for your coffee? And they want to come back and go, don't do that. I know what you're doing. I recognize you're trying to maneuver me. I mean, is that kind of, you have those fun conversations where you're like, no, I really just wanted coffee. This isn't a whole psyop. You know what I mean?
It's funny because I that does happen all the time. People say, are you social engineering me right now? And I'm like, no, that's a bad play to do that to your friends, family, and potential clients. But I got to say, it works on me. Like I had this one story of this young guy. We had a private party at an event that we only get invited to with, if we had a special badge. And he came up to me and he gave me a bottle of whiskey, scotch. And it was my favorite. And I go, how did you know that this was my favorite scotch, Glenfarclas? And he goes, you mentioned that on one of your podcast episodes. I said, I did? So now he's telling me he listened to me, he remembered something, and now he bought me a gift.
Yeah.
He gave me it to me. I'm like, thank you so much. And he didn't ask for anything.
No.
I felt indebted to give him something. So I'm like, hey, man, here's a badge for the private party tonight. And he's like, oh, I'd love to take this, but I got 5 friends with me, and I don't want to abandon them.
Yeah.
And I found myself reaching in my pocket, giving him 5 extra badges. And I would have never done that in a million years, but it's influence.
Well, I'm older than you, but I grew up with a show called Columbo, and that's where Columbo would have said, no, I want you to have the whiskey. And then as he got to the door, he would have said, by the way, my daughter needs an internship at that place. Do you know who she'd call? And you go, yeah, she calls me, and as you're drinking the whiskey 3 hours later, you go, I think I got maneuvered here.
Yeah.
But,
I tell that story all the time because I know exactly what he was doing, and it still worked.
Yeah, why not? Sometimes there's no victims, there's only volunteers. We're almost out of time. Where can people find the book?
So if you can go to ChristopherHadnagy.com, you can find all that information about the book. But you can go to Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, anywhere. It's all over any bookstore. You can find it on there. And
are there more books in the future, or are you going to kind of stick with this one for a little while, promoting it?
I'm going to promote this one for a bit, but I am working on a new idea. Gearing some of this towards leadership, so we'll see. I'm still a gardener, but I'm trying to come up with the concept first. Gotcha.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Our author here, Chris Hadnagy. The book is called Human Hacking: Win Friends, Influence People, Leave Them Better Off. For having met you, and I'm glad you brought up the Innocent Lives Foundation. I have ILF. I was going to ask you about that. Boy, I'll tell you, it's nice. It's nice to get some notoriety. It's nice to have your name on a book and you see it in a bookstore. It's an ego thing. Whether you sell 10 copies or 100,000, it's cool. But to take some of your expertise or money or time and put it into helping children, God bless you for that. I tell you, that's really something. And good for you for that, Chris. Thank you again. The book is Human Hacking. They can look at it on your website. I also saw it's on Amazon and places you would buy books, right? So if they can't remember your name, they'll certainly remember this interview and they could go find it at several places. Hey, search the word human hacking. You're going to see it pop up, right? Yep. All right. Thank you again, Chris, for doing this interview.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching at home. I'm John Gray. As always, I like to end the show by saying, whatever you're reading, please keep reading.